Okay, welcome to Streaming Media West for those who weren't here yesterday. And thanks for coming today. In the next 45 minutes, we're going to talk about fine-tuning your adaptive groups with objective quality metrics. And I've been encoding video for more years than I like to recount. And I found that everybody's got an opinion when it comes to what's right for encoding. And what I like about objective quality metrics is they let me be informed rather than just opinionated. So, I do a lot of consulting and helping people figure out what the best parameters are for their adaptive groups or for their single file streaming. And I've been using objective video quality metrics for about the last 3 years to kind of put some mathematical basis to those opinions. And that's kind of the workflow I'm going to share with you this morning. Here's our agenda for the next 45 minutes. Start off talking about what objective quality metrics are, talk about the tools that I use, and then we'll look at applying those tools to common configuration decisions you make when you encode with X264. Then we'll look at measuring adaptive groups, and then we'll talk about where to go from here. So what are objective quality metrics? We all know the best way to measure video quality is to have people look at the video and form opinions, right? That's the acid test. That's really what we want. The problem is that it's too expensive and it's not automatable. It takes a long time, costs too much money. It's kind of a problem to do. So what the industry has come up with is a bunch of algorithms that attempt to predict how different viewers will judge video. And some of the ones that we've heard of are PSNR, SSIM, for structural similarity index. The video quality metric is kind of the metric that I've liked since I got the Moscow University tool. We'll look at what that is in a second. And then there's another newer metric from the people who invented SSIM called SIM+. And that's in a tool called the Quality of Experience Monitor from SimWave. And that's a tool that I reviewed, and I've reviewed both of these tools, and you'll see links to those in the presentation. And the SIM+ tool has got some pretty unique elements that we'll cover in just a second. So what I used to do when I tried to configure video files is I would encode my video files, I would import them into Premiere Pro, put them on the same timeline, and then I would try and see how they differed visually. And that's pretty valid, and I do that sometimes now, if I want to back up the mathematical stuff that I'm looking at. But it's pretty error-prone, it's pretty time-consuming, and if you're trying to test 1,500 different configurations, it's unwieldy. It's almost impossible to do if you got to do a high volume of evaluations. And this is kind of what I went from looking at files one by one to a lot of automated tools that allow me to create a chart like the one that you see over here on the left. And in that chart, and we'll see ones that look like that, the green files are the highest quality, the orange files are the lowest quality, and the red squares indicate a variation of over a certain percentage, I think 7.5%. So I went from looking at files visually to this kind of data that I think you get so much more of it, it's very useful. And if you're in the consulting business or you just want to show your boss you know what you're doing, you've got real math and real statistics to kind of back up your opinions. So the benefits of objective quality metrics, you get more data, you get better data. And the basic high-level operation is you start out with your input file. You start out with your source file, usually a mezzanine file. You encode it, and then you use the tool to compare the original and the compressed file. And I say trust but verify with these objective quality metrics. And the objective scores are nice, but these tools let you look at the files that you've encoded so you can see the actual quality deficits that they're reporting. And that's important as well. Sometimes you'll get very little differential. So this is an example of how VBR versus CBR differs. The overall score is very similar. CBR is a little bit behind, but it's not significant enough to really warrant any kind of change. But if you look at individual regions in the file, which is a section here that we're looking at, the CBR file gets very, very ugly for a very brief period of time. So not only these tools give you scores you can compare, they also indicate spikes of quality that degrade the overall footage. So you never look at just an objective score without checking the frames, and you'll see how these tools make that a lot easier than it is trying to do it the way I used to do it. So there's two tools that I use. I use the Moscow University Visual Quality Measurement Tool, that's VQMT, and it's developed by the same group of people, the same researchers who do all the H.264 and now HEVC comparisons. So these guys have been comparing files for years and years and years. I think they're up to their 13th comparison of H.264, and they just put out their first HEVC comparison. So they compare a lot of files, they use a lot of algorithms, and I think they built the tool to facilitate their analysis. So it's a very user-friendly, very tool that I use almost every day. The second tool is the SimWave Video Quality of Experience Monitor. Again, that's from one of the inventors of the SSIM metrics. The SSIM metric just won an award from Hollywood as being one of the most valid metrics of video quality. And they use a newer SSIM-based algorithm called SSIM Plus in this tool. So the video quality metric tool from Moscow, and let me just go through it. So this is the VQMT. This is from University of the Moscow University. And you see that there's a bunch of different algorithms that you can access. So they've got a little bit of IP in this, but for the most part, they reveal a lot of different algorithms that you can apply. And the ones I've found most useful is the VQM, video quality metric, and we'll see why in a second. But you can apply any algorithm that you want with this tool, and that's one of the things that's really attractive about it. If you like PSNR, if you like SSIM, you can apply that several different ways in this tool. You don't have that flexibility with the Sim Plus tool. And this works in GUI mode, which we'll look at in a second, and batch mode as well. So here's the tool, and the workflow is basically you load a source file, and again, that's the mezzanine file that you started or that you encoded, and then you can load one or two source files or one or two encoded files to compare that source file to. You choose the metric, and then you press process. So it's very easy to apply. And used to be you had to convert all the files to YUV to use the tool, to use the GUI tool. You don't have to do that anymore. You can load native MP4 or HEVC files in the tool. If you use the command line, you do have to convert to YUV first. And that's a simple, it's kind of a pain in the butt step, but FFmpeg automates that, so it's pretty simple as well. And the cool thing about the tool is once you finish the evaluation, this is what you see. And the top graph is a graph, and here I analyzed two files. So if I analyzed only one file, you would only see one graph. So here we're seeing the difference in quality between the two files. And the red file is the first processed, the blue file is the second processed, and this is the VQM metric. For the VQM metric, lower scores are better. So you could look at this area, and the top is the entire file, and the bottom is the area in the top file that's in black. So that's kind of a zoom in of the entire file. There's a scroll bar on the bottom you can use to move through the frames and kind of scroll through the area. So what you can do here is you can use that slider to go to a particular frame. So if you see a spike and you see, well, let me compare the quality there, you press the show frame button on the lower right, and then you get to this window. In this window, on the lower left, you can barely see it, but you can toggle between the three views. So you've got the source file, the first compressed file, and the second compressed file. And you can just hit the hotkeys 1, 2, 3, and then you can cycle through the different frames. So it's really easy to see if there's a spike, and we'll look at some examples of spikes in a second, you can really easily see what the visual differences are between the files. So, and that's one of the things I like about this tool, and it's one of the things I like about the video quality metric, the VQM metric, is that if you see a spike and you go look at it, you're going to see a visual difference. So there was a high correspondence between what the score said it would look like and what it actually looked like. And really that's what it comes down to with an objective quality metric. You want one that accurately predicts deficits in the file. And that's why I like VQM, because it did a really good job of that. And this is the interface where you would see that. And command line operation is very simple. You call the command line code up top. You list the source file, the encoded file. And again, this is in YUV format, so you have to convert first. The format that you want to test it in, the test that you want to apply, and then the resolution. So you create, and I've done hundreds of these, where you just load it up at night and come back in the morning and they're all done. The file that you open up, it creates a CSV file, and the top score is the average for that particular metric. And again, the metrics vary. They do a lot of them, but for the VQM metric, lower scores are better. So pros and cons for this tool, and we'll see it in action throughout the course of the presentation. It's affordable. It costs $9.95. It's very visual. Again, you can very easily see the issues that it's telling you you're going to see, and it has multiple algorithms. Some of the deficits are I can only compare files of like resolution and like frame rate. So if you encode a 1080p file to 640 by 360, you can't compare those files in this tool. If you want to compare a 640-360 file, you have to create a source file at that resolution and use that to compare it to. The scores don't correlate to any subjective perception, meaning the score of 0.8 doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean it will look good to a viewer. It doesn't mean it will look bad to a viewer. It just means 0.8 is better than 0.85. So one file is better than another, but there's no correlation between how the algorithm predicts a viewer will actually judge that file. And we'll see that the Sim Plus has that correlation, which is one of its best features. And then there's no correlation with any particular platform. So there's one score, and even though a video file that looks great on an iPhone might look terrible on a big screen TV, this tool does not kind of comprehend that reality. It's one score for the file, and that's it. Okay, if you want to learn more about, and this presentation will be online at the Streaming Learning Center website probably in the next hour or two. It'll be online at the Streaming Media website probably in a day or two. If you Google my name and VQMT, you'll see this review. And if you Google why I like VQM better than PSNR or SSIM, or just use that bit.ly link, you can see a demo video that I put on YouTube that shows how to use the tool. Okay, so that's VQMT. The other tool I use that I just got in the last 6 months, a review is up, I think it came up in the October issue of Streaming Media Magazine, is the SQM, which is the SimWave Quality of Experience Monitor. And the couple cool things about this tool. Number one, it's based on the Sim Plus algorithm. So this is a very advanced algorithm. I think this is the only tool you can access the algorithm from, and it's from the person who, from the team that invented this SSIM metric itself. The scores do correspond with their view of how a viewer will judge the file. So if you get between an 80 and 100 score, a viewer should look at that file and say the quality is excellent. If the score is 40 to 60, they'll say fair. And that's how it ranks. So you can judge a number of files, and you'll always see a score, and they're always relative. 80 is always 20% worse than 100. It can predict ratings on multiple devices. We'll look at that in a second. So it can look at a file and say, this will look great on an iPhone, but it's going to look terrible on a 65-inch 4K TV. It does have a separate command line tool for Windows and Linux. And it can perform live QoE monitoring. And there's a bit.ly link to the review where you can just Google my name and SQM, and you should be able to find it. The workflow is pretty similar. You load the test file, you load the source file. You can only test one file against another in the GUI. And then you choose the platforms to score. So you say, I want to evaluate this file for a tablet or an iPhone or any number of platforms that you want. And then when you're running in GUI mode, this is the interface that you see. And the meters on the right are the scores for the different devices that you selected. And on the left is kind of the cumulative score for all devices during the test. The problem with this interface is you can't stop the video and go back and forth and look at the frame within the interface. SimWave, the company is coming up with a way to do that, but you can't do that within this tool. I found that frustrating in my review. The upper right shows the local perceptual quality in the compressed file. You can toggle that to the source file if you want. And on the left is the compressed image. Here's the CSV file you get back. There's a core score, which is just kind of an average score on no particular device. And then you get, on all the devices that you selected, you get different scores. So you see the Sony X9, the Samsung HU9000, which is a big screen 4K TV, and the Lenovo monitor. And then the mean score is the score that you're going to use for comparison purposes. So this is CSV file you open up to get the scores from this tool. And it can run two ways in batch mode. It has a batch mode that you load into the program. The nice thing about this is if you have any errors in your batch files, and I always have errors in my batch files, it tells you it won't load the file. And then, so you don't start a file, think it's going to run all night, and then get stopped because you forgot to put the wrong drive in or the wrong address in. So very nice in that it does that. And then so basically you just let this run and it spits out the CSV files, and then you can look at those later. This is the interface that they're building. This is a separate browser-based interface where you basically drag the CSV file into the browser, and then you can compare as many files as you want. So this is coming. It wasn't in the version that I reviewed, but this is coming. And there's also the ability to click within this interface and then get to this interface where you can actually view the files like you could in the Moscow University tool. So they're doing a lot to make the tool a lot more visual. And this is all browser-based. So the cool thing about this is different people can use it on different computers. As long as you have the source files to refer back to, you can always kind of get this data. And you can always get this data without the different source files if you just send the CSV files and let them dump it into the browser. So it's going to be nice when this comes out. So the pros of the SSIM Wave SQM tool is that it's got a unique algorithm, SSIM Plus. SSIM is very well respected. This is the next generation algorithm, and it's even more respected by the quality geeks in the video industry. The scores do correlate with viewer perceptions. That's pretty useful. It's a major frustration with VQMT. If you get a score of 2.4, you don't really know what that means. You know it's better than a 2.5, but you don't know if it's good or bad. It can do the multiple device checking. It can handle multiple resolutions, and we'll look at an example of that in a second. You can have a 1080p source file, and then you can test 640 by 360, 720p, number of different resolutions, and get scores from that same source file. And soon they'll have multiple frame rates. So if you want to check, what's better, 640 by 360 at 15 frames per second or 10 frames per second, you can do that kind of comparison. It's a more expensive tool. It's only got 3 algorithms instead of all the ones that the Moscow University tool has. And again, the current version lacks visualization tools, but those features are coming. Okay, so I wanted to, I teach a lot of, the thing about these tools is they're kind of addictive, right? So you start out, yesterday I taught a class in how to encode to H.264. So you say, okay, the optimal B frame setting is 3. And then you have this tool and you say, well, I can't really just say the optimal keyframe, B frame setting is 3. I have to test for that. And then, so you start to test for that, and then you start to test for everything. So this is just a few of the things that I've tested for. And then we'll go to how this is applied within the context of an adaptive group. So I performed all these tests in Sorensen Squeeze. It's a nice GUI-based tool, does a nice job with X.264. Unless otherwise indicated, I tested 720p at 2 megabits per second for 24 frames per second content, and 720p at 2.5 megabits per second at 30 frames per second content. So pretty much the same bits per pixel value for both files. I used the very slow X.264 preset, and I didn't apply any tuning to the base files that I was compressing. So the first thing I wanted to check was, there's presets that come with X.264, and presets are just, simple ways that the X.264 developers had said, this is how we're going to trade off quality versus encoding time. So the first thing is, well, how much quality, how much encoding time, what's the optimal preset? And pretty much the default for most encoding tools is medium. So if you don't do anything, if you just use the default, you probably end up with medium. And it turns out medium's not that bad a choice. So I looked at 8 files. Tears of Steel is the movie file. That's 24 frames per second content. 2 different animations. 2 general purpose videos that I had shot. One a concert, one a haunted house advertisement. 1 talking head to see how videos differed based upon the, if you had really low motion content. And then a screen cam video, because I encode lots of screen cams and I have clients who encode lots of screen cams. And then a tutorial video, which essentially is a PowerPoint and video. And then I encoded all the presets. I measured how long it took to encode, and then I measured in BQMT and SQM. So here's what I found. So there's a range of presets here going from ultra fast, which is the fastest, to placebo. And according to both VQM and SQM, you get 95%, well, at VQM you get 98% of all available quality at super fast. Okay, so if you just don't use the ultra fast preset, you're getting 98% of the quality. And for SQM, you're getting, it's very close as well. And then this is kind of fun things you like to do when you have too much time on your hands and data, is then you kind of plot it and you say, okay, well, how does time relate to quality? And what you see is that, if you, at super fast, you get 98% of the quality in, not much longer time than you would with ultra fast. So you'd never use ultra fast. But if you were starting to get time constrained and you were using the medium preset, you could cut all the way down to super fast and you wouldn't lose that much quality. So if you're saying, okay, we either have to buy a new machine or encode faster, that's something you could do. On the other hand, if capacity isn't an issue, you could roughly double your encoding time over medium, go to the very slow preset, and then you get a little bit more quality at not much more encoding time. And this is, so what I'm basically saying is you're getting, 98% of the quality with super fast. So the difference between ultra fast and placebo is very significant. The difference between super fast and placebo isn't. So this is the difference between ultra fast and placebo. And again, you see massive differences between the 2 files that you processed. And this is super fast and placebo. And here you see very little differences between the files. This would not be visible if you actually looked at the file. So bottom line is, again, if you need to buy more machines to encode your video, switch to super fast. If you're really quality centric and have plenty of time, switch to very slow. Otherwise, medium is probably a pretty good balance. Okay, what about X.264 tunings? Anybody use tunings for the videos that they're producing? Another thing you get to measure is the effect of that. I looked at one animation, Big Buck Bunny. I found that tuning gave me about a 2% benefit. When I applied both grain and film to the 3 movies, didn't see a lot of pluses but Tears of Steel was 11.46% worse with the pretty much with both the film and the grain. So I don't recommend people use these, and I don't see any evidence that they're going to dramatically improve things anyway, and they could have a very negative effect. What about keyframe interval? I know a lot of people coming from the broadcast world like a keyframe interval of 1, as compared to 3, which is pretty much what a lot of people use. It can produce a pretty significant difference. In all the tests that I did, the keyframe interval of 1 was the worst score. That's the red. And longer keyframe intervals produced better scores. So, If you're using one and you're not forced to do that by the length of your adaptive group, I would switch to essentially the length of your adaptive group. I use 3 most of the time. Pretty interesting that in Big Buck Bunny and Screen Cam, there was a pretty significant difference in quality if you use a keyframe interval over 1. So these numbers are kind of significant. And then VBR or CBR, not surprisingly, CBR, if you're using one-pass CBR, that is always the worst alternative, except for that one case, the tutorial video. Again, that's the talking head in PowerPoint. And there, 2-pass was always the next worst, except for that one where it was the worst. And then the different VBR constrained produced different levels of quality, but they were always better than any of the CBR alternatives. And the total quality delta got pretty significant here as well, including the 45% difference for screen cam. If I wasn't, I'm working with a client now who does a lot of screen cams, so that's something I'll follow up on and make sure that's not file specific, but that's a pretty interesting data point. So we're seeing, there's a pretty significant difference between CBR and VBR, and then this kind of gets to the data spike that I talked about. I mean, if you're looking at these numbers and you're shooting, Tears of Steel is 18%. I mean, that's a pretty big number. But some of these are pretty small, 2%, 4%, not a huge deal. The big problem with CBR versus VBR is that, again, you have transient spikes of quality. The CBR finds a frame it can't handle, and it makes the frame look ugly to fit it within the required data rate. And this is where the VQM tool is very useful, right? So you scroll on the VQM tool to where the blue frame is really high, and then you click to view the frame, and this is from the Cintel animation, and on the left you see the CBR, and on the right you see the VBR, and it's there's noticeable degradation in the CBR file. Now this is Telestream Switch. This is a brand new product, or actually it's version 2, which is brand new of Telestream Switch, and they put in these file analysis tools, which are pretty useful in the context of the work that I do as well. And what you see is on the bottom, the constant bit rate is pretty constant. I mean, Squeeze does a pretty excellent job in producing that bit rate in a constant way. And in the VBR file, even though this is 125% constrained, we're seeing a peak of 5.8 megabits per second, which is more than 2.5 times the target data rate. So the CBR VBR trade-off is you do lose, you do have much more variability in the stream than you do with VBR, than you do with CBR, but you do avoid the transient drops in quality that you get with CBR. And this is a pretty big issue because a lot of people like using CBR because they think it's better for ABR streaming, but you really hate it when you get the transient drops in quality. So again, when I'm working with a client, we'll create 3 or 4 test clips, we'll run CBR versus VBR, we'll cycle those clips through their ABR process and make sure that they stream well, and then we'll make a decision. Just wanted to point out Switch is this tool here. It has a lot of other features it's really becoming more and more useful. And there's a free version, but if you want the version with the frame analysis that we saw, it's going to cost you $300. And it also does a lot more. There's a lot of stuff that I'm not talking about that it does, and this is really useful. There's really no tool that does this as effectively since Inlet had a tool called Semaphore that cost $1,000 but came off the market when Cisco bought them. And there's been nothing on the market that really did this since that went off. And then one of the interesting things about the SQM tool is the ability to answer a question. It's like, so if you want to create a 2500 kilobit per second file, which resolution delivers the best quality? So we tested that. And what I did was I created a 1080p version, a 720p version, a 540p version, a 480p version, and then I ran them through in this case, this is all the SQM, and the red file is the worst, the green file is the best. The 1080p file has the lowest bit per pixel value, so it should have the lowest pixel quality, whereas the 480p is going to have the best pixel quality but the worst resolution. So you're kind of trading off resolution for per pixel quality, and what you see is it's always better to go big than it is to go small in this particular analysis. Now what's interesting here is that both of these screens are full resolution for this file. It's 1920 by 1080, and it's larger than 1920 by 1080 on the bottom. And you can see that kind of over in the upper left. And with the screen cam files and the tutorial files, those have lots of detail, right? It's a screen cam of an application program. So there's a lot of detail that if you subsample that down for the 720p file or the smaller files, you get a very big drop in quality. So bottom line is, if you're viewing this on a full screen monitor or you're viewing it full screen, you're always better going at full screen than you are at some smaller resolution. The difference in the other ones weren't all that stark. And then it kind of looks the same. Things aren't quite as bad when you're viewing the screen cam monitor on a lower resolution than, so we've got an iPhone 6, the resolution is 1334 by 740. The screen cam at 1920 doesn't come out at full resolution anyway. So if you're looking at on a smaller monitor, the difference between the 1080p and the 480p is not as much as it was before. And this is one of the cool features with SQM, is basically it gives you the ability to predict what it's going to look like on a particular device. So that's all the individual encoding parameters that you would look at when you're producing a file, or at least the ones that I'm covering here. Now let's look at how you can use these tools to assess an adaptive group. So this is, a client came to me, 3 or 4 months ago and said, these are, look at my adaptive streams, tell me which ones I need to keep, tell me how I need to configure them. And they came in with 3 1080p streams. This is a pretty high-end movie service in Latin America, kind of the Netflix equivalent. So they want to produce a very high-quality experience for the people watching on the big screen TVs. Obviously, they don't want to throw away money. So they had 3 1080p outputs, one at 5 megabits per second, one at 6.5, one at 7.5. And if you run the tests, you see, SQM, anything in the 80 to 100 range is excellent. So all 3 of these files rate excellent with the SQM tool. And even with the VQM metric, you're only seeing an 8% difference between the highest quality and the lowest quality at 1080p. So, decision one is, do you get rid of the 6500 file and just go with the 7500 and the 5 megabits? And that's pretty easy, right? I mean, you're going to drop one of those 2 files because there's no visual difference. So what we ended up doing was just losing the 7.5 megabit per second file because it was costing them more to deliver, costing them more to encode, but it wasn't increasing the quality of the experience. And then it came down to, okay, well, what do we do? Do we use the 5 megabit per second file or the 6.5 megabit per second file? And this is where you look at, if you go back to this frame graph, you see very little difference between the 2 files. And this is the 75 to 65 comparison. If you go to the 65 to 5 comparison, you're starting to see some regions where there are more differences. And that's when a couple things you can do about that. And I guess one thing you have to decide when you go into this at the start is, what do we care about? Do we care about the average quality, or do we care about the absolute worst quality? Do we want to avoid any quality issues, or do we want to deliver an overall high experience with some potential deficits? And from what I see on TV, everybody's digital these days, and you see blockiness artifacts, and even on broadcast or network TV or Netflix, sometimes you see ugly video. But you have to ask yourself, it's like, do we care? Do we want perfect quality all the time? Or do we want, very, very good quality with some transient drops in quality? And that's one of the cool things about the VQMT tool is in addition to the frame graph that lets you look at where, that identifies where the drops in quality are, this can capture frames at those spaces for you. So if you set it up and say, okay, capture frames, the worst 10 frames or the worst 50 frames, then you'll end up with a bunch of files that you can look at and say, okay, well, this is what it looks like at this particular region. It's kind of a nice feature if you want to see where the ugly frames are. Before we look at the frames itself, you never judge an adaptive group in the abstract. It's always interesting that iTunes encodes their 1080p files at 5.1 megabits per second for 24 frames per second, which would translate to 6.35 for 2997. So that's an interesting data point. Apple is basically, where people who are submitting to iTunes are basically saying they need 6.5 megabits for 30 frame per second files. Apple recommends 8500 in TechNote 224. That's too rich for my blood, and I don't think that's necessary to get good quality at 1080p. And then, where is this going to be watched is a big one. So this is, again, another cool feature of the SQM tool. Here we're seeing the same files at data rates ranging from 1.5 to 7.5 megabits per second, and the quality levels on different devices. So the blue is the iPhone 6. The red is the Panasonic 1080p TV. The yellow is the Lenovo monitor. It's a 30-inch monitor, 1600p resolution. And then we have the Dell XPS, that's a notebook, 1800p. And then the bottom is the 4K TV, 65-inch. So this is the same file measured for different devices. So if I was encoding this for an iPhone, I would say, well, we could use a lower data rate and still get the same quality as a higher data rate when viewed for a higher quality device. And then this is how low can you go. This is all the 8 files that I tested for this particular test, or I guess it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 files. And this is the VQM, so lower scores are better. On the left is the 8500, on the right is the 1500. And some files stay in pretty good quality levels. They aren't dramatically impacted by the decrease in data rate, much less than you would think. On the other hand, some files start to really spike at the 4 megabits per second. And then, again, the nice thing about the SQM metric is that these scores correspond with perception. So basically, all those videos would rate in the excellent range all the way up to around 4 megabits per second, or 3.2 megabits per second for 24 frame per second content. And then you're thinking, well, this can't be right? I mean, Electra is staying in the excellent range all the way down to 1.5 megabits per second. And it's kind of interesting to dig in and look at the file. So this is Electra video at 400 zoom. Okay, so you can really see huge differences between the 1500 kilobits per second here and the 85 kilobits per second here. But this is the same frame at normal resolution, and this is what the frame looks like. This is the region that we're looking at in these files here. So just because something looks ugly at 400 zoom doesn't mean it's going to look ugly at full resolution. And again, the numbers can be stark sometimes, but you always want to test. This is the Vanguard video. This gives you the ability to load, their video quality tool, which gives you the ability to load 2 videos, and then you can drag the slider bar between one and the other. So when I'm coming down and looking at the numbers, I'm going to look at this analysis and see what the video really looks like with the perspective of what the numbers tell me. And then the last question is, what do you do about animation? So you've got one set of presets for real-world video, do those change for other forms of content? And actually they should. What this tells us is that you can get the equivalent score for animations at 4 megabit per second less at some levels. So we got the quality with VQM, the 1.16 quality at 7,500 on a real-world video. We got the same quality with an animated video at 3,500 kilobits per second. So if you're trying to maintain quality over an entire library that has different content, then you don't need to apply the same adaptive group. You should run some tests, but I'm thinking you can save 30, 40% on your data rate for some animated content as compared to what you're using for real-world videos. And then screen cam and PowerPoint, kind of the same thing. Again, I do a lot of screen cam videos, so I'm always interested in how low I can get those. What you see in the VQM metric on the left is that for the tutorial, which is this video here, again, it's PowerPoint and video, between 1.5 megabits per second and 8,500, you see almost no difference in quality. So, a lot of encoding tools, including Sarge and Squeeze, if you tell it to encode at 8 megabits per second, it'll encode at 8 megabits per second. Of course, you could try different algorithms. I'm not going to go. You can use the constant quality algorithm, and probably you should with some of this. But basically, this tells me that if you're encoding really low motion content, like screen cams or tutorials like this, you definitely need to consider using a different preset, because you don't need to encode at the same high data rate as you would for real-world videos to get the same quality levels. And then the last point I want to make about to run these tests is they're very disk intensive. So if you want to run these tests, you're going to do a lot of, the file analysis itself is very disk intensive. It's got to, grab the frames, decode the frames. So you will get dramatically better performance on a newer computer with SSD drives. So this is, I have a Z800 and I have a Z840. These are two dual CPU workstations from HP, and I got an 85% decrease in time in the conversion to YUV on the newer machine that had both a faster processor set and SSD drives. That's a pretty big number. And then running the VQMT test using the batch command line for it, I got a 49% decrease in time. So I could not have run all the tests that I showed you if I didn't have that new workstation in, because it's so time consuming on older computers. But even upgrading to SSD drives should give you a significant benefit in terms of performance. And then, where to go from here? I spoke to both vendors, and they offered discounts for the show. So if you want to purchase either tool, you can get a $100 discount for SQM and a $50 discount for the VQMT at these links, and then you see the discount codes. Again, this particular presentation will be up on the Streaming Media website in a day or two. It'll be up on the Streaming Learning Center website, probably by the end of the day. Any questions?
When you convert the VBR to CBR.
Oh, you know what? I have to get you they want to record this question.
Compare the VBR to CBR, I would expect that for the 200 you will have the same, or at least better quality than the 150 and 125. But on the Intel you actually have worse grade or rating. So how can you explain that?
You could, if I really needed to get into it, I would probably use the Telestream tool and just look at the frames output by the different, look at the frame profile. It could be that, we saw that the 125% constrained went over the 125 constraint. So it could be that all of those have a very similar profile, so the differences are just, random noise rather than anything significant. So that's the first thing I would check. And then otherwise, again, as I started off, opinions are great, but if you test everything and this is what it comes out as, then those are the results. So again, it's not an opinion thing. You would think, as you say, that 200% would deliver better. But if you look at the files and it really is 200 as opposed to 125, then the data is the data. And there is no. I mean, I was very surprised at how little difference it made. I agree.
Thanks.
So is it possible to kind of automate, as a file's coming in, to kind of come up with something that'll kind of look at some of these statistics you're talking about, some of these metrics, and kind of change, kind of have an automated workflow that'll change the parameters based on some of the qualities you're seeing in your video, or is that like a pipe dream?
Hard, I don't know. A lot of this is just pain in the butt work. Just even grabbing data from a file. I mean, if you're a programmer, you can probably automate some of that,
Okay.
but it
Yeah,
really
I guess
depends on your
we have a
program.
lot of programmers, so I mean, I kind of looked at the, anytime I see numbers like that, it's like, hey, can we automate that?
Yeah.
And it sounds like the answer is some of it, maybe.
Well, I mean, if you can interrogate a CSV file and pull data from it, you can. It's not beyond the realm of possibility.
Okay.
But it's not anything that I'm not capable of doing it, so it's hard for me to comment on it.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Thomas Edwards from Fox. I was a bit confused about the different quality on different devices. Is it more accurate to say that's different quality at different viewing distances, or does it actually have something to do with a particular device?
It's the SimWave people are here at the show, and they'd be better qualified to answer that. But the why don't you? Are you from?
This is Abdul. I'm from SimWave. Hi, Jen. So a couple of things. First of all, you can automate that. So I can answer that question later on. So you can do this on the fly, drive an encoder based on quality of experience measure. The other thing is it's both viewing conditions adaptive and device adaptive. So we have both settings in there. You can set the viewing distance as well as you can set the device. So both parameters are there, including brightness as well and a lot of other viewing condition parameters.
Hi, Diane Struntner from Nice People at Work. So you said that you really don't have any, ideally you guys would be situated client side to see how the actual end user interprets some of this video. So are you exploring bringing in some of this QoS data from the player side so when the video actually gets to the consumer that you can get that feedback and then apply that to your encoding strategies?
I mean, there are tools that also here that do that, but that's kind of beyond the. I kind of live on the file-based, on the file-based side, not on the player side. It's an interesting thought.
Yeah, because that would kind of complete the process, right? So you'd do the best on your end to get the encoding when it's sent out to the best types of qualities. Then you understand how it's interpreted by the end users, and then the combination of data can be applied to really improve the.
Yeah, if you can get viewer data, I mean that's the gold standard, but it's just really hard to capture. Okay, I think we're being told to wrap up. Any final questions? Okay, thanks for coming.